Hello, guys. How you all doing? Great to have you here. So today's reaction is from David Parkman's show, and it says Candace Owens interviewed by Bill Maher goes horribly wrong. Guys, this is what the video is all about.
Many of you said that it is an absolutely must watch episode of Bill Maher's Club Random podcast because right wing grifter Candace Owens appeared on his program. I checked it out, and indeed, there is a lot to glean and much to learn from this appearance. Let's just jump right in. Candace Owens is the right wing darling who, by all accounts, has sort of constructed this right wing character and now appears in lots of places making really bad right-wing arguments about stuff. What's really interesting about this appearance is that on the one hand, on some issues, Bill Maher makes a lot of sense. On the other hand, Bill Maher also contributes to the disinformation. I've talked about Bill Maher right often and wrong often. So let's get right into it. The first subject they tackle is climate change. Take a listen to this.
But don't you not believe like in the moon landing? So I'm supposed to believe you about climate?
I think it's so funny how people take, well, first off, I know what I'm talking about with the climate stuff. So I'm just going to go ahead and promote.
Well, you're not the only one.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think you should probably realize.
By the way, Candace does this weird thing where she doesn't even look at Bill. She's just looking into the middle distance. It's a really strange personality trait. And I'm not, it can be connected to a lot of different things, which I won't diagnose here. It would be inappropriate. But it's really weird how she's just staring into the middle distance. She's not looking at Bill Maher.
No.
Like that there is, in the same way that there are narratives, I think you're now more awake to. The climate hoax is one that funds trillions of dollars. And we are not running out of space. You could fit the entire world if you stacked it like New York City in Dallas. So
fit. I just said it's not about.
Fit, but the point.
Notice that she's now talking about overpopulation, which is a different issue than climate change.
It's just that hurricanes are down. The whole idea that every time it rains, it's because something bad is happening is like it's okay.
What I will agree with you on is this. The environmentalists do often lie because they have this idea, this issue is so important, and by the way, it is so important, that it's okay if we shade the truth to get people on our side, and I don't agree with that. I'm always...
You've lied every time.
Well, not every time.
What was your climate disaster growing up? Mine was global warming. They don't even say it anymore.
They don't say global warming anymore?
No, they don't. No, they say climate change. They went from global
cooling... Maybe not in your bubble, but in the world they do.
No, they don't. They went from global cooling to global warming.
They never were in global... No one was ever talking about... It was one... That's such a stupid talking point that you keep repeating. It's a zombie lie. It was one article in one magazine in one day, 1 week in Newsweek or something. Nobody...
Okay, so Bill Maher here is generally right. It is true that as we have learned more about climate change, we know that there can be an overall warming, but that in localized areas, it can actually mean lower lows and higher highs, more extreme weather events, record warm temperatures, record cool temperatures. It's much more complicated. And what they consider the smoking gun, which is you used to only call it global warming and now it's climate change, that's a way to hide the fact that you were wrong. It's actually that there was even much more to it. Then we get to another conspiracy theory, I guess, of Candace's, which is not her own. It's that we never really went to the moon.
Okay, but just to be clear, people did land on the moon.
I don't know.
Okay, there we go.
I don't know.
I do know.
I just want to know why we didn't go back.
We did go back.
What, did we go back? What year?
To the moon?
We people on the moon?
Okay.
I'm asking a serious question. When did we go? When did we back to people walking on the moon? 69. Okay.
July 20th, 1969.
Yeah.
We went back like 10 more times.
Who went back? Who walked on the moon?
America. No,
but like, what were the astronauts' names? Educate me. Why are you?
Remembers what the astronauts' names were?
It's a pretty big deal to walk on the moon.
The first guy, and then after that, yes.
Who else walked on it?
All right. So there's a lot here. This is very dumb. There were a number of Apollo missions which involved astronauts landing on the moon. And you can just look it up. They just don't really seem to know. But this is the sort of endless, cynical skepticism in which if you weren't there yourself, you can just doubt whether it happened. We know, of course, that various third parties, including the space agencies of other countries, which they were able to track and confirm the Apollo missions, the Soviet Union, if this were fake, there would be so many countries with the motivation to expose it as fake. And this is the way they sow doubt about other things. It's not consequential. Like, if you don't believe we went to the moon, it's kind of dumb, but it's not consequential. But the fact that anything can be doubted becomes consequential when you're talking about actionable things like climate change or whatever the case may be. Now, then we get to Bill Maher. And Bill Maher also often says, when it comes to medical stuff, Bill Maher says weird things. The topic of vaccines comes up. Here we go.
Stuff for parents and kind of giving them a guide.
Oh, no, I'm with you there.
Okay, I wasn't sure about that. And, you know, I produced an entire separate series talking about vaccines and sort of the increase. And
well, I don't think
when I was a kid,
I don't think vaccines are a hoax or anything, right? I just
not a hoax.
Okay.
But how, do your kids need from 1982?
Right. No, they don't.
6 to 75,
right.
you know?
I mean, my view, just to be clear, vaccines are a tool in the medical kit, just like antibiotics.
Right.
And just like antibiotics, I wouldn't want to be told everyone's taking them, so you have to too.
Right. Yeah,
like
one size fits all.
If I decide I need one for a certain pathogen and I'm at a place in my life where I think that playing the odds, which is what medicine always is, that would be the smart thing. Okay. But forcing it and in children who never needed it for this, who the least likely.
And they're so sick. The kids have never been sicker. And that's,
right, never
I
been
start my series by asking, these kids have never been more vaxxed. We're the most vaxxed country in the entire world. You know, we have these high infant mortality rates when weighed against third world countries. And you're being told that this is because we're super healthy. You got kids 75 vaccines. When I was a kid, it was 12. You know, and there's been an explosion. People don't even know anything about the diseases. It's just these constant fear campaigns. And then on top of that, in states like LA, you can't opt out. You know, so these are things that parents have to think about now, where you're literally raising your kids. Could you go to prison for saying that I don't want my child referred to as a different gender behind my...
All right, and then we're going to get to that. So, you know, this whole thing about high infant mortality, it's a mishmash of issues. Let's deal with it one by one. They love to mishmash issues. Since the introduction of vaccines, many life-threatening diseases, polio, measles, whooping cough, dramatic reductions in prevalence, these diseases used to cause significant morbidity and mortality in children. So this idea that we're sicker than ever because of vaccines, it's not borne out by the science. Now, are there other issues? Like, for example, at one point, it was thought that if you keep kids away from food allergens, they'll be less likely to develop food allergies. Wrong. That makes them more likely. So now we're looking more at like the Israeli model of introducing peanuts early and this sort of thing. When it comes to the infant mortality, when you look at infant and maternal mortality on average in the US, it is worse than in so many other countries. And it's worse because so many people, thanks to right-wing healthcare policy, don't have access to or can't afford good health care. And in fact, if you divide the country up into the wealthier part and the less wealthy part, the driver of the high infant and maternal mortality is in the poorer areas that are under-resourced thanks to Republican policy. The numbers in the wealthy areas are as good as any of those European countries. And so it's thanks to the policies of people that Candace Owens supports that that's the case. Bill Maher then says on trans issues that Candace is saying a lot of really interesting things.
When I did my editorial about trans, which, you know, I feel like, again, a great demarcation between what liberal is, old school liberal, and woke. Liberal believes trans is, of course, a real thing, and they should be protected and respected. Woke is like, well, before they can like tie their shoe, we tell them they very likely might be in the wrong body.
I ran your segment on my podcast, actually, because it was brilliant.
Great.
Yeah, on Real Time, you did the segment talking about, okay, if this is a real thing.
Why is it regional?
Geography.
Why is it regional?
Brilliant point.
That's what I was saying.
Yeah,
why is it so
brilliant.
regional?
Yeah.
What is it? The water here in California?
It might be.
I've been to dinner parties, more than one, where there's 12 people and they're all talking about their trans kids. They're all.
Scary.
It's almost like that's the norm.
Yeah.
So the idea here is that there's a social contagion, that trans is a fad. There's a legitimate conversation to be had here. It's important to know many ancient cultures understood gender that went beyond the male-female binary. The Hijra people in South Asia, two-spirit people in many North American indigenous cultures, Afafine, I don't know if I'm pronouncing that correctly, in Samoa and Katoi in Thailand. This stuff goes back a long way. What has changed is, number one, the medical understanding, the language we use to describe trans experiences. The terminology has changed. Medical and psychological professionals have been aware of people whose gender identity doesn't align with the sex assigned at birth. That's not new. We know that strong societal pressure and stigma can keep trans people from saying, hey, I'm experiencing this. And so it makes sense that in areas where the perceived consequences of saying, I feel X would be higher, right? If you feel there's more risk to saying that, you'd be less likely to be willing to publicly say, this is how I identify. And then also, it's important to consider that the percentage of trans and non-binary people who are availing themselves, for example, of surgical interventions is no higher now than it used to be. And so, sure, there's like a conversation, I guess, to be had here. But the truth and the reality of it is that it's a conversation most of these folks aren't having in good faith. All right, last topic that they dealt with is January 6th, and it actually got kind of contentious.
On this, Candace.
Definitely should we agree on this.
About, trying to overthrow the government of the United States.
You're just not you're not a weak enough person to really I don't buy this. I think you dance this way because you think you have to placate.
Okay, first of all,
no chance. You think that we almost lost America on January 6th. I just don't buy that you're that soft.
Yeah, I do. And just to educate you a little on this, I was saying this for 5 years when everyone was laughing at me for saying this, that Trump would never concede the election and he would never go away. I was all alone on a raft.
But I mean, you saw BLM riots, right?
Yeah.
The summer leading up to this, right? Where I lived in DC at this time where you couldn't go outside, cars were flipped, things were burned, people were boarding up their windows. Yeah. But you thought the end of democracy, you can say this meaningfully face, happened when people above the age of 65 stormed the Capitol. You thought that was the worst thing you've ever seen in American politics.
Well, I mean, what was the worst scene? That was a small part of a bigger picture. The worst thing was that finally we had a president, after all this history that we've had, nobody ever did this, not Al Gore and not Nixon, who probably didn't actually lose their elections. They allowed this peaceful transfer of power to happen. We finally had a guy who decided, of course, because he's insane, decided that no matter what happens, I won this election. There's only two things that could possibly happen. I win the election, or if I don't win the election, there must have been some cheating. It was looked at by his own people around him, including the Homeland Security Department, including the Director of National Intelligence, including every court, federal and state, including his own lawyers, his daughter, Bill Maher. Everybody told him, you lost this election. They looked at this over and over again. Even the Republican vote counters, like the one he called who said, find me 11,000 more votes. Even those people told him. So plainly, he did not accept losing the election, and then he tried to put in a bun. This is why he's on trial.
I'm just asking,
it's not for
if
lying.
You believe that day, as the media presenter, I'm talking about media hoaxes.
I give you my answer. It's not just that day, although that was part of the scheme. I mean, it's not like coincidence that they showed up on the very day that they were certifying the vote at the very place they were doing it to stop that from happening.
So you get the picture. Candace just doesn't want to accept it. There's no real risk. It wasn't really a threat. A lot of the rioters were old. By the way, if you look at the hundreds and hundreds that were indicted, it does not skew 65 plus. So that's also a lie. They seem unwilling. They're essentially saying, fine, they may have wanted to do an insurrection, but it was too incompetent and carried out by people, I guess, too old and weak is what she's saying, to really do it. Even if true, the idea that makes it less dangerous is, of course, ridiculous. So Candace Owens saying some ridiculous things, Bill Maher saying a few ridiculous things, but at the end of the day, it is free speech, right? They chat and they talk, and then we try to figure out whether we can make heads or tails out of it. Let me know what you think. Curious to hear from you.
Well, what an insightful interview. David Pacman really enlightened me on so many topics. I'm enlightened. And I don't really know much about Mr. Bill, but I feel Candace doesn't really like his personality clash, and also Candace will make a very good politician, like a very, very good one. I like the fact that she's strong-willed, very confident, a straight talker. Either love or hate her, she's not too young to run for presidential race. Like, she will make a very good politician. Guys, hope you were enlightened and you enjoyed this video as much as I did. See you on the next one. Watch, like, subscribe. Be at peace with yourself. Bye bye.